Mr. David Johnson. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I'm happy. So tell me something. Whenever you were growing up, what was your biggest dream?
So, I've always been a person that I'm interested in helping people, whether one way or another. I was just raised in a good home, and parents always taught me to be that way. Dad's been a pastor for many years here in East Texas, and just, treat others as you want to be treated. And so I started out in sports and played sports throughout school, and that's what I went to college for. And actually did coach for quite a while.
What school did you teach for?
I was at Martinsville High School in Nacogdoches.
Okay, what made you take that leap to become the coach?
Well, I had some good coaches when I was growing up, good role models, good examples, and just kind of instilled that in me. I was always kind of trusted growing up as being team captain and helping decision making during the games and things like that, and it just kind of fed into that.
Right. Now, the main thing that gets me is what made you make the decision to switch to be an optometrist?
So, season with the players that I was coaching. I was coaching a girls varsity, and just had some really big talents on that team. And actually, what took us all the way to the top 4 in the state. But during that time, even as fun as the winning was, I felt like there was something missing. Through a lot of soul searching and a lot of research, I decided I wanted to go into something medically related. I looked at a lot of different fields, had it kind of down to either going to veterinary school or optometry school. And at that time, when I was looking to go to school, University of Houston was the top optometry school in the U.S. and was just right down the road from where I was in Nacogdoches at the time. And so I went and visited school, and from the time I walked out of there, I knew that's what I wanted to do.
I have a question. What made you choose between being a veterinarian and optometrist?
So I've always had a love for animals. I grew up raising animals, that kind of thing, and but I've also been the little boy with bad eyes its whole life. Started wearing contacts in elementary school and glasses and that kind of thing. All my family needed eye care throughout. I felt like it was a niche that fit me, that I understood, and that I could relate to patients at the same time. Interviewed a lot of optometrists and found that they had a good quality of life. They had a good work-life balance, and that's what I was looking for, is that work-life balance.
I feel like I feel like it's hard to have it a lot of times. I've interviewed someone with a restaurant. They said they barely have a work-life balance. They're always working.
That's right. And you can work as much as you want to, even in this field, but it affords you the opportunity to have that balance should you want it.
Right. That's always good. Tell me about your time in the University of Houston. What's some things you learned while you was there?
So, like I say, U of H at that time when I was going, and which I think they still are, one of the top institutions for my field in the U.S. as well as the world. Just the clinical experience that you get with them is bar none the best I could have imagined. They start you seeing patients within a year and a half into school of your 4 years. So by the time you walk out the doors, you've already had over 5,000 patient interactions of examinations before you leave to go out and practice on your own. And so the amount of experience you gain, as well as the clinical, not just the clinical, but the educational side, the classroom side, the laboratory side. Doing full body cadaver dissection. Full body. You learn all the systems. You learn it all. We had apes there that we did research with. We learned how to do laser glaucoma surgery. All of those things. That you wouldn't gain at every institution that you do training like that for.
Right. They give you the best shot you needed to be successful in your field.
Exactly right.
I believe it. I believe it. I wanted to ask you something I'm excited to ask you. What was some of the hard lessons you learned while you was there? Like, what's something that you weren't prepared for, but you had to learn to get over it?
So I was the type in high school and even undergraduate, I wasn't a big studier. I mean, felt like I could listen well enough in class and go take the exam. Well,
Right.
it was a big learning curve for me when I got to optometry school there that's not the case. I mean,
Whole different animal.
it's, you're in the class with 100 students, and so they've narrowed down that amount that apply there down to that 100, and there's a lot of really intelligent people I was classmates with, and so you have to step up your game. And
right.
I had to actually teach myself how to actually study for exams that I felt like in other classifications of education that I really didn't study a whole lot. So I think that was one of the hardest lessons for me, is like, man, I really got to put it down now.
Right.
And I did, and it's one of those things, and I think that's something I learned. They say sports teaches kids a lot, and I'm a firm believer in that. I'm a big supporter of sports with the younger generations because of the fact that I think it teaches you life lessons. And there may be a wall sitting in front of you. Well, you got to figure out how do I get strong enough to push that wall down?
Right.
How do I get through that competition that's been stopping me all this time?
Right.
And so it's that mentality, it's that athletic mentality that felt like, well, this is going to be tough, but we're going to figure out a way.
Correct.
So, yeah.
My question is, what would be some advice you can give people besides good study habits to be in your field?
So, first of all, you have to have an interest, not just a scientific interest. I mean, like something that specializes in eye care, like what we do.
Right.
You also just got to have the empathy for your fellow man. There's so many cases you come across in healthcare in general that not everybody's the same.
Right.
But you need to treat it as such. It was one thing I used to tell my students that I trained in Houston is, if you can approach this position and this examination, each one that you do, like your mom or dad sitting in the chair, then you're always going to do it right.
Right.
And and just having that mentality, I think carries people a long ways. Did me. I've had great mentors going through school, as well as that I keep in contact with now,
Right.
that still help me from time to time.
That's good. You saying look at it more like a passion instead of a job.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
I feel that's where a lot of people mess up. Like they go for the money of the job, not the actual passion of it.
Right. One thing about it, people talk about money and this and that. And, money is great. Money gives you choices. It gives you options and allows you to do things that you might not normally be able to do. But one thing about it, one of my mentors said a phrase one time that I really rang true with me. He was like, the main thing is always do the right thing. If you always do the right thing, the money will come with it. And so you definitely don't want to go into something for the money.
Right.
Because you can make money in any job.
Correct.
It's a matter of, are you going to be happy doing that job?
Right. That's a big thing. Cause I know it's like with a passion. I feel like if you a passion, you feel like you never to work another day in your life.
Exactly right.
Right. But one thing I'm excited to ask you about is seeing that you were an exclusive eye care provider at the Johnson Space Center.
Yeah. So while I was in school, I went to the surgeon that was the exclusive surgeon for NASA. Asked him for a part-time job because I wanted to learn more. I felt like I was learning a ton at the school, but I didn't. There were certain sides of eye care I wasn't getting exposure to, namely, cataract surgery, LASIK surgery, various corneal disease that we took care of in that clinic. And so he hired me on as a part-time student. I worked with him as many hours as I had free during the week, which wasn't many. And he and I built a bond, and and I joined him as his clinical and surgical director after I graduated there at the University of Houston. And we did eye care for most everybody that was either a contractor, such as like Boeing, Lockheed Martin, USA Space Alliance, as well as Johnson Space Center, their employees. We did general public eye care as well, but we were exclusive providers for NASA as well. So cool job,
Right.
very cool job. Got to meet a lot of the guys from the Apollo 13 days and get to know them. Very brilliant men. I actually was involved on the surgical team that did the first astronaut to have LASIK surgery before flying shuttle into space. We did his surgery in 2010 before that mission. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but in the midst of it, it was like, man, this is pretty cool. They make movies about these guys.
Right. I mean, I feel like it's cool because, I mean, it's like
Cases that would come through that door that you normally wouldn't see in general primary care practice like what I'm in now. People that walked through those doors needed a lot of help in our cornea specialty and disease pathology clinic. And then, of course, on the surgical side of things with cataracts and LASIK, yeah, I mean, that experience was bar none the best I could have ever imagined.
I see you a big man taking risks.
Yes.
That's good.
Absolutely. You have to be successful, I believe.
You are completely right. I want to ask you one thing. How did you manage to become the director?
That was essentially Dr. Lipsky, the surgeon that I worked for. He founded the ophthalmology group that I was a part of. It became the second largest ophthalmology group in Texas and one of the largest in the nation. And he founded it on his own in 1982. And so he got to kind of call the shots. He was the godfather of the place.
Right.
There was 20 of us in the group as doctors, but he was the original. So he told me, he said, I want you to join me. He said, I know where you're wanting to move to. He said, I want you to stay here in Houston with me, and I want you to work with me. And he was like, I couldn't turn it down. I mean, it was just too good of an opportunity. And so spent a long time with him, and he has since retired, and which afforded me the opportunity to eventually come back here to East Texas.
Was that a hard transition for you?
No, not at all. I mean, like I say, I'm originally from here. East Texas was all I knew until age 25 when I moved to Houston. And so now it was easy. I mean, Tyler's a lot bigger than I remember it.
Right.
But coming back here has been great.
I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you something about some ocular. So can you name off some ocular diseases and what are some warning signs?
Sure. One of the biggest ocular diseases we treat is glaucoma, and unfortunately glaucoma doesn't have a whole lot of warning signs until it's very advanced. And so that's why we harp on the fact that, just routine annual visits with your eye care provider is so important, because glaucoma is a very silent, blinding disease that will actually cause blindness left untreated. Nowadays, we typically in routine examinations can catch it early and treat it with something as simple as eye drops in most cases, and essentially stop it in its tracks.
Right.
Diabetes is another big one that actually affects the eyes.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it's the eyes are typically affected in cases where diabetes is uncontrolled. It can cause a lot of bleeding in the retina, as well as other things, other major issues. Cataracts, it can cause early cataracts. So that's a major one that, and patients, primary doctors are very big on them getting their eyes checked. And and I correspond with primary care and endocrinology all the time. Hey, we did our examination, this is what I found. If we start to see something come up, and a lot of times it shows up in their eye examinations, a lot of times we can coordinate with their endocrinologist or primary care doctor, whoever's following them for their diabetes, and maybe change a medication to see if we can improve their hemoglobin A1C and their blood glucose in order to be able to limit or stop those changes within the eye. Hypertension is another one that we catch a lot of. There's so many Americans walking around with uncontrolled hypertension.
What happens when it comes to hypertension?
So you can develop what's called hypertensive retinopathy, which is bleeding within the retina due to the blood pressure being elevated for too high or too long. Once we find that, typically it's someone that doesn't know. And a lot of times it's so uncontrolled that they're likely on the verge of a stroke in the near future. And so with something like that, they're either, if I catch it and they don't know about it, typically I'm sending them either to the emergency room or directly to their primary care office immediately.
Right.
Because a lot of times in those cases, time's of the essence.
Could you tell me about laser refractive surgery?
Sure. So laser refractive surgery, in a nutshell, started in the 1980s. It was started without a laser. It was actually done with a scalpel. It was called radial keratotomy. People call it RK. It was designed by a surgeon in Russia and eventually came to the States in the 80s. A lot of surgeons, including the surgeon I worked for, actually went to Russia to train before it was allowed to be done in the U.S. So when it was allowed, he was already ready to go. That evolved into laser refractive surgery in the early 90s, and there was something called photorefractive keratectomy, or PRK is what people call it now. That was essentially the godfather of LASIK surgery. PRK had a long healing time. It was very uncomfortable for the first week at least during that healing process, and so ultimately LASIK came about in the mid-90s. And LASIK is a type of thing that is great for Americans because Americans wanted things yesterday.
Correct.
And
I know that.
Your healing time is about 8 hours in LASIK and it's over and you see. And so it's so quick, it's so easy. Your downtime is 1 day,
right,
and you're back to what you want to do the next day. And it really caught on in the mid-90s, and it's still very popular today. And we have enough data now, after roughly almost 30 years of it, that we pretty much know the ins and outs and what the repercussions are of certain treatments and things of that nature, where we don't make those mistakes.
correct.
So
So one of them say I'll be kind of nervous to have like a laser, but I think my perception of laser is different than of course people think of a laser. Cause like laser, I guess is like it's very precision. Like it's not gonna like just.
That's correct. It is very, very precise. So it measures down to 1/1000th of what the correction would be in someone's glasses, if that makes sense. It's that precise. So we're talking on a microscopic level is what it's measuring. So with today's technology, everything's done with 2 lasers. One actually makes a corneal flap that's pulled back, and then the other one does the treatment. Either flattens if they're a nearsighted person, or it builds the cornea up if they're a farsighted person, in order to make light refract correctly onto the retina and essentially fix their vision.
I have a question. So I have what exactly is astigmatism?
So astigmatism is an oblong shape of the cornea. So most people have some astigmatism. Certain races tend to have higher amounts. For what reason, we don't know. Is genetics. That's about the only way we can explain it.
Okay.
But astigmatism can be treated with the laser as well. In the early days, you were eliminated if you had astigmatism. But nowadays, the lasers are so good and they're so precise that we can treat nearsighted, farsighted, and astigmatism.
So you pretty much have perfect vision if you.
Yes.
Wow.
You wake up the morning after and you see.
Perfectly fine.
In most cases, yeah.
So could I go? So that's like a random question. Could I go try to be a pilot, like a fighter jet pilot, after this, or do you think it would still be?
So there's still limitations with that.
Well, darn. Same thing. They all may be able to drop in a jet plane.
So PRK is what's required in the military setting because of combat. Even though the LASIK flap is extremely strong enough to go to space and pull those G-force. We know that now because we did his.
Okay.
But in a combat style setting, the fear is that flap could get hit hard enough to where it would move, and then the patient couldn't see.
Right.
Or the soldier couldn't see. And so it's same with the force that you pull in a fighter jet, that LASIK's not allowed within the military. PRK is, but there's a lot of limitations that the military puts on that when it comes to fighter pilots.
Thank you. My question, what really got you to go back to Houston to help interns?
So I was doing that during my tenure with the surgical center.
Oh, so this was all still in the same.
Right.
How long were you in college for this? Like, how long did it take for you to become out on your own?
So about 11 years, just under 12 years. Yeah.
So you did this at 25. Congratulations. You bold. I feel like I said, people feel like they want, I feel like a lot of people just feel like they want everything now. I feel like that you have to have a lot of patience.
Yeah, I mean, I was in school throughout my 20s.
Right.
You know, I was in my early 30s before I was out of school, but if you have that goal and you set out and you say, I'm gonna reach that goal, then you get after it.
Right.
And you don't worry about everything else, because, I wasn't where I felt like I needed to be, and I don't feel like that would have changed 10 years from then. So what would I have done? Been in a setting where I didn't feel like I was in the right fit of a career?
Correct.
Or do I go do something else, sacrifice a few years for a lifetime of a career that I enjoy?
Yeah, because you're here now in this wonderful office.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you about what got you to go to the Texas Medical Branch of Galveston Ophthalmology.
So they did rotations through our center as well. So they learned LASIK from us. Mm-hmm. We did a lot of times I would work with the residents on how to perform pre-op and post-op care, because that's what I did for my surgeon. Mm-hmm. I didn't perform the surgery, he did those, but I did all their work up to surgery and their aftercare. And so showing them what to look for, teaching them how to do calculations for the laser and what to look for as far as how to pick a treatment for that patient. Right. It's not all which is better, one or two, we're ready to go, here's the prescription we're treating. Right. There's a lot of ins and outs. How's this patient going to react 5 years from now, 10 years from now? So there's a lot of thinking involved when it comes to your calculations, and I taught them a lot how to do that. And of course my surgeon, Dr. Lipsky, would actually sit down with them. They actually practiced on cow eyes before doing any human eyes, and would show them the techniques of the actual procedure itself.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about being a clinical investigator.
So I worked with them for about 6 years. I did pharmaceutical research trials, if you will, for drugs during phase 2 and phase 3 of their clinical trials prior to going to market. Mm-hmm. So I worked with a few companies doing that. Very interesting, just a different side of things I hadn't done before.
What made you want to do it?
I just like the research stuff. I like numbers. I like putting data together. Right. That's probably the coach in me a little bit. Right. I like statistics, and so it was interesting to compile those research numbers and data and see how patients were reacting to drugs or responding in a positive way, and figure out which drugs were best to actually go to market to the general public. All right.
If the time with that, I wanted to ask you, this is a quick little point I want to ask you before we're done. Mm-hmm. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now?
So I'm in a fantastic dream setting right now. This is something I've always wanted to be in this type of setting. Don't get me wrong, I love the surgical and pathology clinical side. but I'm into this about 16 years now in practice, and this gives me that work-life balance I was talking about.
Right.
And coming back here, this is just, I couldn't have asked for a better situation to walk into. Ragzone Martin Optical, who I'm affiliated with next door, they are the oldest optical in East Texas. They've been here just under 80 years. They're the best outfit as far as optical wear and customer service that I've ever been associated with in my career.
Correct.
And that goes for any of the ones that I've been associated with in Houston or elsewhere. They are tops in the game when it comes to optical. And so being with someone like that and the reputation and just customer service level that they put forth, that's what I want to be with. And so 5 years from now, I can see myself being right here, probably with an associate at that point,
Right.
maybe two. And so just depending upon how fast the practice grows.
Correct.
So
Wonderful. I want to ask you, well, obviously we talked earlier about your wonderful shark you got over there. What's some of your favorite pastimes outside of doing this?
So I love to deep sea fish. I love going to sporting events. You know, like I say, being an ex-coach, I mean, how can you take that love of sports out of the person?
Correct.
So, you know, as you can see on my wall, you know, I'm an avid Cowboys fan, and I'm an avid Texas Rangers and Dallas Mavericks fan too. So,
So you going full Texas with it?
all the way. And
Wow.
you can go ahead and accuse me of being an avid Houston Astros fan too. It's just tough for me because they're in the same division now with the Rangers.
So you think?
So.
I can see that. I can see
But
that.
between that and, you know, those would, I'd say, were my biggest hobbies, and I enjoy them.
Okay, I want to ask you one more thing. What do you? Or we're gonna take a little bit. I guess we can't think about it now. I guess the ultimate question is: are you happy you took that chance on doing what you're doing now?
Oh, no doubt. I'm so happy I did it. I have a classmate. He and I are good, really close friends. He practices over in Louisiana. We were looking at each other during late in our third year out of our 4 years at optometry. We were talking one day after we got done studying. He goes, "Dave, do you think you would do it again if you knew how hard it was going to be to get to this point?" And I was like, "I don't know. Ask me next year when we're out of here." And I can tell you, I'd do it again.
You do it again.
Yep.
I'm happy for you. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. Appreciate you being on
Thanks,
here.
Christopher. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Glad you came in.
Appreciate it, man.